All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first breakout session. We're so excited to be able to bring together a really strong panel of people who are focused on the issues of cybersecurity in the built environment in our smart cities. So as we follow the keynote speaker, who is really inspiring about introducing new technology, this panel is going to give you some food for thought about how to think about the risks associated with that technology. Unfortunately, folks like the folks on the panel today are used to being the ones in the room saying no. But I want to pivot that to say we're not just here to say no, but we're saying let's think really strategically and thoughtfully about how we're implementing these new technologies, because there are risks associated with them. I'm excited to introduce my panel. Laura Osborne will be the first to speak. She is a senior research scientist and director of the Security in the Built Environments Lab here at the University of Washington, and a good colleague of mine, so I'm excited to welcome her. Greg Smith is joining us from the City of Seattle as the Chief Information Security Officer and Director of Security and Infrastructure. Jack Zhang has joined us from the University of Houston, where he is the director of the US DOT UTC Tier 1 Cyber Care Center. And finally, Chuck Benson joins us from the University of Washington on the staff side as the Director of IoT Risk Mitigation Strategy. So we have a lot of wisdom in the room today, and I'm excited to welcome them. So Laura's going to kick us off talking about organizational cybersecurity issues.
Thank you, Carrie. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Laura Osborne, and as Carrie mentioned, I'm a research scientist in the Department of Construction Management. For the past 3 years, I was lead PI on a qualitative research study around organizational and cultural cybersecurity challenges with smart buildings, and particularly looking at smart buildings on higher ed campuses. And the purpose of the project was that we wanted to look at the collaborative work that was going on between IT and facilities personnel and try to find ways that maybe we could improve some of that collaboration. And that project took about, we had 2 years of ethnographic field work where we were actually observing IT and facilities personnel working together in meetings and following along project teams as they worked on specific building projects. And we also had 41 interviews. The majority were with higher ed institutions. Of those 41, we had representatives from 15 institutions, and we also had some private industry interviews. So what I want to do today is just kind of give a broad overview of the complexities, the sort of organizational and cultural complexities around cybersecurity. So this slide is a table we like to use, and it's really the first challenge that takes place in the owner organization. And what was at the heart of what we were studying in our research project it was around the different silos that happen around IT and OT. And OT is operational technology, and IT is information technology. And IT has really been around the world of computer science, whereas OT is really centered on engineers and skilled trades. And OT technology is concerned with controlling and managing physical devices, whereas IT is around managing information. But when you start bringing in Internet of Things and smart devices, these two things converge. And this convergence creates certain risks. It creates certain technological risks, but also organizational risks around governance, technical knowledge, practice, culture, and policy. So for example, with governance, usually operational technology is under the governance of operations and management departments, engineers and technicians, whereas IT networks are usually governed by the IT department. But when you start having smart infrastructure and IoT networks, often the responsibility of who takes care of these systems is unclear, and sometimes they go undermanaged. Another example is around culture. So with OT, facilities is around maintaining and managing the physical processes, where IT is around maintaining and securing information. And sometimes there's difficulties trying to align the agendas when you get to IoT systems. Particularly, for example, like if you have an IoT network around a particular building system, you might have facilities wanting to keep the network more open so they can have their vendor come in and protect the, work on the device, whereas IT might want to actually keep that network more secure. So that's one of the complexities. The next complexity is the owner organization itself, which is made up of lots of different departments and has a number of different influences, external influences. So within the owner organization, you have your operations and maintenance department, which has its own disciplinary norms and its own culture and its own organizational structure. And IT has its own norms and workplace culture and organizational structure. And then you also have design and construction teams that are coming into the owner organization and working with capital projects. And the influences that are also going on are public policy. You have policies on privacy and security, which are influencing IT. They have to remain compliant with those policies. And you also have energy policies, codes, and standards in the built environment, which O&M and design and construction teams have to remain compliant around. And on the other side, on the right, you have the IoT marketplace itself and vendor products, their security considerations and customer needs. So each of these, so this is sort of complexity, organizational complexity going on, and the external impacts that are coming in to play. Oops, sorry, I'm moving things around too quickly. Okay. Oh, and I have one more point. So what we found around this complexity, though, is that there's generally poor communication across all these sub-organizations going on in the owner organization. There's really poor coordination around tasks related to IoT systems, particularly around design, procurement, implementation, and maintenance, and really big knowledge gaps between all three organizations. So O&M doesn't always know the IT side of some of the smart systems that they're working on, and IT doesn't always understand the operational piece of the smart system. And then vendors and the products also bring in risk due to the supply chain vulnerabilities with products. Some products may not have very strong security standards, and it's a really hot marketplace, so it's not always clear how much they've thought through security. So now we'll move forward. So here's an example of some of the coordination issues that tends to happen on new building projects. These are new constructions. And this is what ends up, you have your concept design, and your IoT decision-making tends to happen around design documents and construction documents. And it tends to happen with the design and construction team. And then your facilities and IT personnel typically don't learn about IoT devices until you get to construction, when they start being installed. And sometimes they don't even know that the device or the system is there until people actually start moving in. So there's been no input on the system, the design of the system or the type of product until it's too late, really, for those decisions to be made. So our research was looking at these complexities and realized there were three main areas where these challenges were taking place in the smart system or IoT lifecycle. Design and construction, vendor procurement, and operations and maintenance. So what I have here listed are the stakeholders that should at the very least be involved in all three of these, but are not always involved. So often on design and construction teams, we had capital projects working with their project teams, and operations and maintenance, however, might not come in until very late in the project when decisions have already been made about smart systems. Same with IT. With vendor procurement, you have your vendors, your procurement personnel, and again, sometimes operations and maintenance and IT are not involved, particularly on new construction projects. And then you also have your capital projects who are involved. And operations and maintenance, their challenge is around, again, those disciplinary differences and trying to manage a system that's a convergence of both of those. So in a perfect world, you would at least have all these stakeholders involved, but also often they are not. Let's see. So some of the key questions your organization needs to ask, I'm going to start with design and construction here. And the first is around long-term needs. So what is your organization's long-term needs or goals for IoT systems and data? What's the purpose of the system? Is it about sustainability, efficiency, improving the quality of service? And then who are the different stakeholders that are affected by the IoT system? So different systems are going to have different stakeholders from IT and facilities. So who are the point people that can answer questions on operations and cybersecurity? And then you want to also know not only who they are, but what are their needs, goals, and values for IoT devices and data. Like, why does each group actually care about the device or the data? Why is it meaningful to them? Do they need to be compliant with a specific type of state law or an organization's own policy? Do they care about data privacy? What are their goals for the system? And what do they need the devices and the data to do to reach those goals? And then finally, you need to know when should these stakeholders be involved in IoT decision making. Do your capital projects teams know about IoT cybersecurity needs? Do they even know they need to ask the question? And would they know who in your own organization to even ask to be able to help with some of that decision making? So for example, we had one university who actually started bringing in their cybersecurity professionals earlier into the design process. That was their way of not having big surprises when everything was starting to actually be installed. So procurement questions. One thing we found was a lot of institutions didn't have really clear cybersecurity criteria for procurement related to built environment systems that were going to be using IoT. So a lot of things would slip through the cracks because they might not even consider the system or the device to actually be a smart system or as something that IT should worry about. It's always been a facilities device. So you need to think about what are your security criteria for different IoT systems as an owner organization. And then what are your procurement processes that will ensure vendors meet these criteria? Do you have procurement processes that spell out these security criteria? Or is there a way to vet vendors? We had another university that had actually developed vetting committees made of different stakeholders that were impacted by different building systems. So they would have like a electric stakeholder group, and then they would have an HVAC group. And not only were they vetting vendors, but then they started to develop their own standards for the university. So the other question, are operations and maintenance and IT cybersecurity operations needs actually reflected in the procurement processes? So do those procurement processes actually incorporate the cybersecurity criteria you need to think about? And then again, the other question is, do they need to be a part of the procurement process, like the university I was speaking of? And then finally, operations and maintenance, the kinds of questions to ask within your own organization is first, who is responsible for different IoT systems and data? Who's responsible for maintaining those systems, updating them, repairing them? Any kind of tasks that impact both IT and facilities, like who do they need to be talking to? Does your IT department know who to contact in facilities about specific systems? We found often they did not, so that's a good place to start. And then does your operations maintenance department know who to contact in IT about IoT systems? Do they actually know who to talk to? And it's also good, again, and I'm sort of repeating this again, to understand what the different values and needs for IoT data, devices, and networks are, both for your IT personnel and your operations and maintenance personnel. Like, what matters to them about their networks? Is it about security of information, ensuring no one can get into the smart system, potentially hack into other business systems? Is it just simply to make sure that the system works and is working efficiently and the building's running smoothly? Those are really different needs, but some of those goals can actually be aligned, and some will have tensions, and you just need to actually start looking into those tensions in order to find a solution. So what I hope that you all are taking away, that it's important to start getting your smart system stakeholders engaged and getting them talking and integrating IT and O&M more into smart system and smart device decision-making, as well as installation, procurement, and maintenance. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to do a quick changeover. We're going to have 4 presentations, fairly brief, and then have a chance to do an open discussion. So I welcome Greg Smith up to the podium.
Thanks, Carrie. And good morning, everybody. And I was sitting there listening to Laura thinking, just nodding, yes, IT, yes, more IT, please. It's a pleasure to be here at PacTrans as part of this panel. My name is Greg Smith. I'm the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of Seattle. And I also direct a division within Seattle IT called Security and Infrastructure. I'm also a proud UW alum, class of '89. Yeah. My entire professional career has been in the public space, in systems and networks and the type of technology infrastructure. And I have to say that yes, while the way that we have managed and handled technology has changed over time, nothing really compares to the last several years. We've seen a lot of change with the introduction of cloud, with the pivot to mobile for customer engagement and managing systems and accessing data. And also the consumption of huge quantities of data and turning that through analytics into intelligence. That's brought a lot of change to our environment. But from my perspective, in my opinion, as an operations and security guy, the biggest pivot to the way that IT shops do the work that we do and deliver the technology services that we deliver has really and also how we prioritize where we put money and our staff has really come with the rise of highly profitable cybercrime and the losses that organizations have been experiencing over the past several years from that rise. And whether your technology is modern or legacy or cloud-based or on-premise, if you are not protecting it adequately, you're inviting a cyber attack and the many kinds of negative outcomes that can result from that. So I'm really excited about the focus of this panel, and I apologize for my gravelly voice. I am also fighting a cold, but I think that is appropriate for a serious cybersecurity guy. Brings the gravitas. I'm going to share some high-level context for how we protect the City of Seattle's IT environment, and then pivot more specifically to some of the OT and IoT activities that we've got underway. We have a lot of departments at the city that have a lot of ambition and a lot of strategic plans around those technologies. So we want to be able to support those strategic directions while keeping them on the right track to provide the rigor and the safety around the technologies they're thinking about. Let's see. Just some fun facts about the City of Seattle. I don't know who lives here, but incorporated in 1869, strong mayor governance model, 13,000 city employees plus or minus based on seasonal staffing. Probably the most important thing here for me to point out is that we have consolidated IT across the City of Seattle. So in 2016, all IT teams that were previously dedicated to departments were brought together to form a 600-person strong Seattle IT serving the whole city. We do everything. We do infrastructure, end-user devices, applications, project delivery, the whole gamut. And we serve 33 plus departments. That number seems to fluctuate depending on what's happening with the political climate. But beyond departments, we offer so many services to the residents of Seattle of all stripes, so much diversity on that front. And as CISO, I hold the responsibility for protecting the city's IT technology assets, including data systems, and ultimately the ability to deliver any technology-based services to the residents. And our cybersecurity program at a high level starts with this focus on people, process, technology, and governance. And people, process, technology is a pretty common framework to think about this stuff and technology delivery. And it's relevant to think about a cybersecurity program in this way as well. People, we want them to understand that security is a shared mission and that everyone has a role to play. Our processes need to be adjusted to take cybersecurity and privacy, I will add, big deal in Seattle, of course, privacy, into consideration. And our technology is chosen to implement those goals, or to drive towards those goals. We add governance to the chain here because in government we have a resource-constrained environment, and we need to make choices about where we apply dollars, where we apply staffing, and we get into discussions about risk acceptance, risk tolerance, if we can't do it all. So we have to make some strategic choices there. I'm not going to talk too much about this slide because it looks like an org chart and it's kind of boring, but I showed this really to show the breadth of functional areas that go into delivering on a cybersecurity program. Some of the big traditional areas that I have: infrastructure, databases, systems, and that kind of thing. But I will call out that identity is the new perimeter. That's kind of a thing we hear about. Your login is really what secures the entire city environment. That's why we have multi-factor authentication. That's why your bank makes sure you have multi-factor authentication, and Netflix and everything else these days. But the traditional roles that roll up to me are security operations, resilience and service delivery, which is where emergency management functions reside, your ability to respond in an emergency scenario, and cybersecurity risk. And this is where we actually do assessments and try to enumerate the risks, the security risks in our technology environment. And then we use that process to stack rank and address and try to reduce those risks. Architecture and strategies to make sure we're all going towards the North Star and don't deviate and end up opening up new risk areas. We do base our cybersecurity program on a framework. And there's a lot of frameworks to choose from out there, a number of them. We have been working under the National Institute of Standards and Technology's cybersecurity framework, affectionately known as NIST-CSF, for a number of years. And this NIST-CSF breaks down the myriad aspects of a cybersecurity program into 5 top-level categories. Do you know what you need to protect? Do you have the safeguards in place to protect them, those assets? Do you have the ability to actually recognize when something's going sideways with a cyber incident? Do you have the ability to respond? And once you've responded, can you bring your business functions back into place? So those are the high-level categories. Within each of those are a number of different capabilities. Like under Identify, you'd have asset management technologies, for example. But this is what we build around. And my teams on the prior slide all drive towards continual improvement in all 5 of these areas. I will also add that NIST is always expanding. They have, in the last couple of years, started to develop frameworks around IoT, around Internet of Things, and are releasing publications specifically around that. It's a growth area for them, and in some ways they're chasing the train, but important, and as I'll get to, a thing we're going to be paying attention to. In the city, when I mentioned IT consolidation, I don't think I mentioned that what was not consolidated was operational technology. Those technologies did remain with the departments. So things like all the technologies that go into energy delivery, that remains with Seattle City Light. All the technologies that go into water operations and wastewater management, that remains with Seattle Public Utilities. In our Transportation Traffic Operations Center network with Seattle Department of Transportation remains with SDOT. These are the big three, and so there's SCADA, there's industrial control systems, directly related to these critical infrastructure functions. Additionally, I was going to mention, SDOT is probably the most germane to this audience. We have this city-spanning OT network for transportation. There's 4,000 IoT devices on this network. That's cameras, that's traffic lights, that's electronic signs, detection devices, weather sensors on the major bridges. And all that data feeds into the Traffic Operations Center, which also supports our life safety departments, police and fire, as well as the Emergency Operations Center at the City of Seattle. We have a lot. And all of these departments have strategic plans about doing more with IoT devices in their environment. Seattle City Light and SPU already have smart meters deployed, advanced meter infrastructure that gives you real-time data for the energy you're using and sets them up to do more creative rate structures in real time. SPU are doing very cool things with managing their infrastructure, their pipe infrastructures. They've got a sensor that they can screw onto the top of a fire hydrant that can acoustically detect if there's potentially a crack or an issue with a water line. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. They have a ton of those types of capabilities. I was hearing about it earlier this week. SDOT, dipping deeply into curb management, sensors in the pavement to determine where open parking spots are, to help manage freight delivery and devices. Okay, I'm on time. I'm moving right along. But the point here is that there are a lot of strategies happening and cool capabilities with outstanding outcomes that we're being driven to. But I, as a security practitioner, am thinking about the cybersecurity impact, and that all of this adds to what we call attack surface. So what are we doing right now? Active efforts. We're partnering with our OT and SCADA groups in cyber incident response. This is an area that often isn't thought of when new capabilities are rolled out. How are you going to respond in the moment if something bad happens? Well, we want to make sure our businesses also have a way to think about how are they going to deliver services if IT capabilities are down. That's the business continuity piece. Technology asset management around IoT isn't that mature. We're working with them on that and exploring new capabilities. We are working with CISA on their new Connected Communities initiative, which was initially built around the 5G networks. They are expanding that to look at everything that those 5G networks feed, the whole attack surface. And we're working on grant proposals to see if we can tap some money. Some final thoughts, observations, that I didn't really want to put the words on slide. I'm going to a little bit more real talk here. I think key is building respectful partnerships. And Laura was really speaking to sometimes the OT and IT sides really don't communicate that much. So that building those partnerships so that we have mutual respect for what we can really bring to the table is going to be pivotal going forward. My second point, regulation. Where we are most mature in our environment is where regulation has a foothold. I'm talking about the energy space. Because not only does that mean that there are audits and money going towards cybersecurity roles within the departments, but the vendors know that they have to provide compliant products that are secure. And when the vendors aren't bringing that, you're fighting another front. IoT device management, already mentioned this. This is a big problem from a security perspective. They're easy to deploy. They often get forgotten. They're often undermanaged. We don't know what we've got out there, and they're a very popular attack vector for threat actors. Just a couple other things. Data and AI. A lot of these sensors are collecting data, and that introduces new scrutiny on the security and privacy of that data. And then finally, just cyber incident response. Already mentioned this. Things like cyber insurance want to know that you have an incident response plan, that you can act, that you've exercised, that you tabletop and build that muscle. So the first part of my talk was really showing the rigor and the maturity that we were kind of used to in the IT side, and I'm thinking about how we get that into the OT and IoT side of the house, and so that's where the partnerships come on. And so that's a whirlwind overview of the city. I apologize for the pace there. And also some insight about how I, as a CISO, am thinking about this stuff and these incoming technologies. And my final thought would really just be to look to your cybersecurity leaders in your organizations as strategic partners to ensure that even as amazing new capabilities are introduced, we're not skipping any of the rigor that's necessary to make sure that it doesn't introduce risk and an actual compromise data and privacy and operational integrity of these new systems. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So that's a local Seattle perspective. I now get to welcome Jack Zhang from University of Houston to kind of give us a different perspective from the south end of our country. So welcome, Jack. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. So firstly, I'd like to thank the US DOT to give us opportunity to do some research and education in cybersecurity field. So the second point, I'd like to thank Dr. Wang and the planning committee, conference planning community. So to arrange this event, to give us opportunity to discuss cybersecurity. The third point, I'd like to thank Laura and Greg. Already provide and discuss high-level cybersecurity strategy, policy, and framework. Okay, I will focus on a case study, discuss some details. Okay, so the title is, Trust Management and Attribute-Based Access Control Framework for Protecting More Runtime Infrastructure on Cybersecurity Risk. Okay, we are running a center. So here is US DOT. This one is UTC logo, and that one is cybersecurity, cybercare, logo. So I will talk more details about our center. So at the end of this slide. Okay, so maritime cyber security problem has been recognized by our center 2 years ago. So then we work with Port of Houston. So Port of Houston is a big port. So they have a lot of problem. So for example, whatever facing our cyber attack, during the last a couple of years. When we started to discuss that, they are excited. To know, okay, people can help them to find what's the cybersecurity problem and try to find the solution. Here, I list several key points. The first one is why we do cybersecurity research on in maritime field. In maritime, normally we have two types of information. The first one is public. The second one is private. For example, where is the ship? That's a public information. Everybody can find the information on the internet. However, the second one, private. People do not want to share it with other people. For example, the owner. They do not want to let other people know, okay, what they are seeking. The second point is network facility. Nowadays, including all ships, they have network facility. Of course, normally they connect with satellites. Of course, next step, they will use Starlink. Third one is software program and operating system. 3 and 4, I will discuss that together. Software, so including whatever so they used. For example, their cargo management system, so our communication so system, so with whatever owner or receiver, so including our stakeholder. So operating system including a lot of type. So that's a hard point actually for us to figure out how to build a good cybersecurity protection system. So one simple example is operating system, so including Windows, so Linux, ISO, Unix, even they use DOS. So maybe so DOS is a very old operating system. So could you please let me know who knows DOS? DOS. Okay, so perfect. Okay. Yes, so that's beyond my expectation. So some SIP still use DOS, so on very old SIPs. Okay, so that's a hard point actually for us. So we'd like to combine our operating system, our software programs together, so in our protecting system. Okay, so next one is database server. So after we discuss operating system, so it's easy to understand. So there are a lot of type of database servers. Okay, so we move to next point, large-scale data storage. So in our previous discussion from Laura and Greg, so they discuss data management. So for maritime, they have the same problem. Next one is local and remote instrument. So local, of course, is so on a ship. So remote is offshore. So the office, so in a port or so in a company. So the last one is wired and wireless, sensor and network. I believe that one is easy to understand. So we have cybersecurity problem. So normally we know they come from so wireless. Wired is safer. So however, there's still some problem if a hacker is on a ship. Okay, so let's go to next page. So why cybersecurity? So I list 5 points, 5 top reasons. So the first one is disruption of infrastructure system. The second one is leakage of critical information of people and assets. The third one is financial loss and economic damage and injury or loss of life. So if a cybersecurity problem lead a pirate attack, so there may be lead injury and loss of life. So our goal is developing a system of trustable access control. So that's a recent trend. So automated system malfunctioned and all failure. Expensive. One point is we only have a few news about cybersecurity in most of the field. So for example, maritime. And another big field, so I recognize this oil and gas. I come from Houston. So oil and gas company is another big field. So I have collaborated with. So normally they do not want to disclose cybersecurity attack. So even there's a lot. Okay, so that's why. So we do not have a lot of news. So the second one is expensive and valuable cargoes were stolen. So third one is maritime stakeholder. So they recognize. So there's a problem related to cybersecurity. So it's like cybersecurity is the seventh field has been recognized by US DOT. So before that, we know. So there are only 6 fields. So the first one is crew on vessel and the operator in transit. So last one is cyber operation of other system connected. Okay, so trust management policy. So I listed 2 papers. One is from SEED, so and second one is new. Okay, so they list some policy. So we can discuss more details after this session if you want. So proposed framework. So that's what we did. So currently, so this project is an ongoing project. 5 features we'd like to have. So the first one is adoptable and highly scalable. So second one is automatic permission assignment. A third one is security protection. So fun grading. So the last one is low energy consumption. Okay, so that's framework. So mainly including 2 parts. The first one is authentication, and the second one is service. Okay, so formal verification. So after we have this framework, we did the verification, so including 4 parts. So I do not read through the 4 points, and we are going to a case study. So here, so that's a case study related to verification. So totally including 6 steps. So from a user submit a request to the last step, so the user gets permission, so to visit some information. Okay, so here, that's our future work, also ongoing work. So the first one is supplier customer pair, so with multiple information system. The second one is develop intrusion detection system. The third one is system systematic metrics to evaluate effectiveness of access control system. Okay, so the last one is QA. I believe that will be the after Chuck's presentation. Is right? Okay, so many thanks for your attention. Okay, so we could discuss more details if you interested in that after this session. Okay, thank you.
All right, so getting down into the technical details of how we make our systems more secure, I'd like to welcome my colleague Chuck Benson to the podium, and we're going to turn the lights on, so prepare yourselves for that transition. As we finish the panel discussion, and after Chuck, we'll move to a Q&A session, so start preparing your questions.
About how much time?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to do mine in interpretive dance, if that's okay with you guys, just to kind of. It's a niche I have. So I don't have slides, but I do have books. I wrote this book a few years ago on managing IoT systems for institutions and cities. So I've got a few extra copies if anyone's interested. You're welcome to take a copy. On the topic of innovation, and Carrie mentioned this earlier, alluded to it, about being the people that say no. I believe innovation and risk mitigation and risk management go hand in hand, because it's just to innovate without constraint is kind of uninteresting. But when we look at mitigating risk and managing risk as we innovate, I think those two go together, and we end up having something that's actually usable if we're paying attention to that. So what I'm going to do is talk about a couple things that I think about in this space. So we talked about different kinds of IoT systems. So in a building, like right here, it's all over. I almost guarantee the shade controllers are on a network controller. There's a camera up there, I'll guarantee it's network controlled. This room controls network controlled. The HVAC, there's sensors all over the place, is network controlled. There's energy management and monitoring all over the place, that's network controlled. So it's all around us. And then on road examples, like we heard some already, there would be sensors for, counting vehicles, looking at weight and load, looking at road conditions, looking at safety considerations, doing video surveillance there as well. Whenever you hear sensors, you can think IoT. And the big thing to think about here is the numbers, the raw numbers. It's not like we're putting in one device or one machine or 10 devices or 10 machines. It's hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands that are network devices. And each of these devices is a little computer. It's a little network computer that interacts with the environment in some way. Every one of those is attackable. Every one of those is hackable. Now, they add a lot of value if they're deployed well and they're managed well. They can allow us to do things like we've seen a lot already. But if we don't manage that risk, it can bite us in the backside. So as we're developing these things, we want to think about, can we manage what we own? And we've got these devices and these systems of devices coming into our institutions and cities and regions, again, by the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Can we manage these things that are now within our purview? And the rate of growth, at least for the next few years, the rate of growth of devices, it looks exponential, so it's doing this. And our ability to manage is down here somewhere. So every day, that gap between what we can manage and that rate of growth gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we've already got issues, but it's getting, worse sounds too negative, but that gap is getting bigger and bigger. Can we manage the stuff that we have? Excuse me. And another thing about, this is that number of devices, Greg used the term a while ago, is attack surface. Because when you have more devices and more things, those are more opportunities for a bad guy, whether it's nation state or I can move. Thanks. Whether it's a nation state or a criminal, or there are people that want to get in, and when we have more devices, that's more places that can be attacked. Also very relevant is this IoT and OT. You've heard that language already. Bad guys, it's a popular place to attack. And part of the reason is there's a lot of stuff to attack. Part of the reason is it's often deployed, it's in a way that it's undermanaged or sometimes even unmanaged. And the impact can be so big. If you could shut a city down, or if you could shut a university down, if you could shut an organization down, like, let's say shut off the heat. Let's say someone would attack campus and shut off the heat in the middle of winter. Well, that's a big impact. So the bad guys are motivated to go after these kinds of systems. IoT and OT is a number of which we've heard about already today. So it's a real thing. And again, the numbers get bigger and bigger. To shift a little bit and to tie into something Laura was talking about earlier, another risk we have is skill set, because we need the traditional IT skill sets, and we need this ability to deploy these devices and systems out in the field. And they come from very different backgrounds. And the groups and organizations and the people that can do both are hard to come by. And we need that. They're hard to come by, so there's a shortage. And when there's a shortage, things don't get deployed well. Things get deployed in a way where they're undermanaged or unmanaged, and that creates, then our risk picture goes way up. And not to be dramatic, I actually see this skill set shortage as a national security issue, because we're building so many systems so quickly, and we don't have these skill sets to do it well. So we're just building in risk as we go. Another issue that I think about is speed of development, and I'm sure I bet no one here has a project that's like, where they're told us, well, take your time, just finish it, whenever you get to it. Everyone's pressed to develop quickly, right? And when things get done quickly or sped up, stuff gets overlooked. I was thinking about when the Ukraine war started and oil pipelines and gas pipelines started getting cut off. And there's a big push to get liquid natural gas out of the U.S., for example. They were building a new LNG terminal in Germany. And that had to be built really quickly. Because it had to be, because of what was going on. Do you think stuff got overlooked to build a natural gas terminal fast? Of course it did. We know it did. That's the way life is. And I'm not saying don't do that, but when there's this push for speed of development, it exposes a lot of this IoT and OT risk issues. And again, I'm not saying don't do it. We got to do it. We got to move forward with it. But if we don't mitigate that risk, we're going to pay for it. How am I doing? 2 minutes, okay. I want to touch on something Greg talked about, incident response and tabletop exercises. I think that's a huge thing in the cyber realm. We're doing more and more of that here, and I think we're going to do it from here on out forever. And in fact, I'm going to talk to Greg after this about us in the city maybe doing something together, because we can't predict it all. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, and as Laura was saying, these things are complex, and tabletop exercises can help to surface some of that. So the incident response piece and tabletop exercises, it's critical for us to focus on it. And if your organization, I'd say it's worth asking your security people if you're doing tabletops, because it really starts to flesh out where the holes are. And I'll do 2 more things. So an example of interorganizational coordination where we're trying to tie in the traditional IT and the built environment people that deploy these sensors. Some of the things that we do here at the university, we have a monthly meeting on network segmentation, and that's a geeky thing, but with bringing in IT people and built environment people to talk about how our networks are established. But it's a way of getting us in the same room at the same time. We do another one on critical infrastructure IT. We do another one on meter management. The city here drives more and more energy sensor deployment. So we meet twice a month on that one. And we also have something called Smart Campus Advisory Committee. All of these are to try to get these different groups together, the traditional IT and the facilities work, to come together and start to working on things. One more thing on excuse me, supply chain. All of these devices are all network computers. In these devices is software. And the software, there's many components, and those pieces of software come from a lot of different places. Because this software does business logic, or this software does encryption, or this software talks to the web, or there's all these chunks of software, and that all comes from different places, and who might in turn be farming that software out, or farming that work out. So we have all of these devices with these little chunks of software, and we're really not sure where it came from. They're trying to do things now to help narrow that, but we have to acknowledge that. We have all these devices and things with little pieces of software, and we really don't know where it came from. All right, so it's a subset of things I've read about. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So it's time. We have about 15 minutes left to our session, and so it's time for questions. I guess I'll bring the microphone over to you.
Thanks for the great presentation. So my question about ransom attacks, because I think there was a piece of news a couple of weeks ago about how many ransom attacks are happening and not being reported, and in many cases, it's just agency and cities elect to pay the ransom to get the operation running again. So I think for the city of Seattle or the ports, are we protected? Is it something that we all need to worry about? Are there redundancy in the systems to make us comfortable that this would never happen to our cities? Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is probably the number one thing that we think about. Do we have the security controls in place? The NIST cybersecurity framework, the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Do we have all the pieces in place to stop an attacker from getting a foothold, from moving laterally within our network, from taking a credential that they've swiped through a phishing email and escalating those privileges to an administrative role, and then deploying ransomware and then pulling the trigger one day when we're like at a barbecue. That's precisely like the number one scenario that we build our defenses around. And of course, when you do things that way, then you can eliminate the potential for a lot of other things at the same time. And if there are multiple things you have to think about there. I wish I could sit here and say we're secure, but we've got a lot in place. That's can only go into so much detail, but we do have not only the processes in place, but I also want to go back to the thing that we were talking about with the cyber incident response. I think one of the things that we talk about is that cyber attacks are so common now that it's more of a when than if kind of question, and it becomes more of a conversation of how you can limit the material impact. How do you limit the blast radius? How do you keep it from being a multi-service impacting kind of thing? So you need to know what the most important things are to protect. What are your crown jewels of data so that they can be encrypted, so they can't be exfiltrated and released on the dark web? And that's another piece of the ransom picture. But also, how are we as an organization ready to respond? Do the executives know how to respond when those decisions come in the moment? What will they do when the ransom is sitting there to be paid or not paid? It's never a good plan to pay it. Marks you as a future victim, and you don't know that you're going to get the outcome that you think you're going to get from paying it anyway. But some organizations have had to. Hospitals can't ethically maybe not consider that path. It's a complex thing, but we think in terms about, well, we can't necessarily say we'll never have a ransomware. What we can do is say our most important things are protected, and if something happens, we think it will be the blast radius will be contained based on the controls we have in place.
I'd chime in on a couple things there on the incident response. We have to see that, we have to be good at it, because it's going to happen. He knows it's going to happen. I know, to the city, I know it's going to happen here, and in some small ways it could be happening as we speak. So we have to change our mindset where we will be responding, and we want to be good at responding. And then one more, I think too, about the ransomware. In doing some of these exercises, I'll bet most people in here, I mean, we work on it too, if that happens, what is the decision chain? Do I decide if we pay or not? I mean, probably not. Does my boss, does the president, do the regents, does someone up at the state? It's not clear. It's a worthy exercise to go through, is to simulate like you had a ransomware attack. Then what, because it's a new thing, what is the path for figuring out what we're going to do? Because the FBI will be knocking at the door. Anyway, just to reinforce the incident response training and practice.
Great, that was a great question. Let's see, I see one here. Great.
Thank you. I guess my question kind of pertains to this whole ecology of IT. And I think Laura touched on it. And by the way, Greg, I'm really glad that there are younger persons like you who only graduated in '89. I'm a '78 graduate. Traditionally, especially in government, or rather government still suffers from that, IT is looked upon as a support function. They are not there at the table at the executive level generally, and therefore they come in further down the line. I think they need to be at the executive table when strategic direction and systemic change needs to be, is being decided on. I was wondering if you would like to comment on that and how private sector may be the source for lessons learned. Thank you.
Well, I can't speak to the private sector too much because most of the work we were doing were around higher ed institutions. But I agree, I think IT should be much more upfront with decision-making on these issues, and as well as facilities too, because you need the things to be operating well in order to secure them well. So.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's changing a little bit slowly. Our chief technology officer reports to the mayor's chief operating officer, and previously to a deputy mayor. So, part of the mayor's cabinet, and we're doing a little bit more to position IT and the city budget office and finance is a key voice or decision maker in the context of cyber liability. The kinds of financial risks that you might take on with, say, a bad contract with a software as a service provider who doesn't want to own the liability if they have a breach, not us, them. And those often run through me as a security issue. Talked about my cyber risk team. They can identify bad contract terms that don't adhere to the T's and C's of the city of Seattle. But for me, it's not strictly speaking a cyber risk. It's not going to lead to a cyber event. What it could lead to is a mainstream business risk problem of a big financial impact because we signed a bad contract. And I think we are strategic partners, and we're starting to talk more about mainstream business concerns. And I think that positions us more strategically. And we are viewed a little bit more as a mature partner. Because traditionally, I think part of the problem that you're speaking to is the fact that we're gearheads, and we only speak in a certain kind of way, and maybe we don't know as much about what SDOT is planning to do. And that's why we may be not included at the table.
Go ahead, Jack.
Okay, so I add 2 points. So the first one for cybersecurity problem, each problem. So there are 2 important steps. The first one is realize it. The second one is recognition. So things are changing. So whatever government leadership or stakeholder, so for example, U.S. duty already at the 7th field, so to the traditional 6th field. So of course, the 7th field is cybersecurity. So that means, so people already know, okay, cybersecurity is a problem. So of course, transportation is one of infrastructure. So it's like a creek from city of Houston, city of Seattle. Okay, sorry. So he talked about power, and talked about water. So so that's for public field. For private field is like whatever oil and gas, whatever healthcare, everybody care. So healthcare information, I believe. So nowadays, so people realizing that, so things is changing and changing. So the second point is recognition. So I can share an interesting story. So I do not use government as an example. I use oil and gas, so private companies as an example. So when we talk about cybersecurity problem, so with oil and gas company, so people always say, so we do not have cybersecurity problem. So there's no attack. So of course, so the reason is if they say, okay, so we have a lot of attack, so there's something already be stolen, so their stock will be, stock price will be goes down. So of course, after several discussion, so we know we need to show something to them. After we give them evidence, so normally people say, okay, so I have to talk with my manager. So then manager will give us response. So that's a long period. So normally it's like 6 months or even 1 year. So they start to discuss a real problem. Okay, so they will provide something. Okay, so we get attack. So last month. So how can you help us to fix it or find a solution? So that's the second step, recognition. So after the second step, so the rest problem, I believe, is easier. We already know there's a problem. So then we can find a solution to solve them. So for people, so do not worry about that. So that's why we are here to help our country, so our people, to figure out cybersecurity problem and fix it. Thank you.
All right, great. We have a question back there, please.
Yeah, first, thanks for the very nice presentations. So I'd like us to focus on the data part, on data security. A question particular for Greg, because you mentioned about the city lights, which is electricity grid, and also transportation, which is traffic side. Both systems need a lot of data sensing to collect data and make decisions about the system. And my limited understanding of the electricity grids is they've been a long-standing practice to have a layer of protection of the data to check if it's been attacked or falsified data injection, and then mitigate and then make decisions. But for the traffic systems, my understanding is it's probably not there yet. So is the city considering some added layer of protection about the collected data to detect and protect the systems?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we talk about I don't really want to point to regulation as being the answer, but I mean, you do have NERC making sure that that data is handled properly on the energy side. And I was actually talking to the CISO at Sound Transit last week, and he came from the energy sector, and he said, well, transportation's kind of where energy was 20, 25 years ago, where there's nothing really compelling best practices yet. And the vendors themselves are not necessarily being thought leaders in that area or bringing the maturity because they're not incented to. So I think and the answer is yes, but I think I need to get in there more, and that gets to what Laura was talking about is we're not all at the same table all the time to be asking those questions. So I don't know the details of all of that, but I do think you're kind of calling out a core issue there.
All right, great. I'm going to bring the session formally to a close now as we are at time, and it'd be great to have a little bit of a break before our 11 o'clock. So thank you all for joining us. Please help me thank the panel for their insights today.